Continuing our conversations with the candidates for Denver Mayor. Kelly Brough, former head of the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, joins us now. Before your time representing business interests in town, you were with Mayor Hickenlooper at City Hall. So you've been a political insider for a long time. This is your first run for elected office. This seems like a year where a lot of people in Denver aren't happy with the status quo. Is this a tough year to be running as somebody who's been on the inside for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I probably don't think of myself that way. I certainly managed, as chief of staff, got to manage the city under Hickenlooper. But I think of myself as, one of the outsiders a little bit too, because it's been a while since I've been there. That said, I think it is a time where we all feel like there's some critical issues and some critical changes we need to make to our city to improve it. And I'm happy to put my name in to try to help.
When we asked this question in the debate the other night about who thinks Denver needs a significant change in direction, it was pretty universal across the board. You're somebody who's worked with current Mayor Michael Hancock on a lot of things. What's your assessment of where he leaves the city?
Yeah, listen, I can't imagine a tougher time for mayors around the nation and some of the challenges and issues. So it's tough, right? And I think it'd be worth asking him how he's feeling about it. Because I imagine the team is really exhausted and tired and struggling to figure out what do you do next. Here's the gift he gave us. We now know from looking around the nation what worked and what didn't work. And I think we get a chance to really hunker down on what are those strategies that we can deploy and start to make more progress.
What's something that jumps out at you that the Hancock administration thought was working and hasn't?
Yeah, well, one thing I think we all know hasn't worked is how we're managing and supporting people who are unhoused. Today we spend a lot of resources moving people around our city, not improving the living conditions for people unhoused or the neighborhoods where they're living. And I think we have to commit. We're going to get people to safer locations immediately and really move people indoors when we can to safer sanctioned locations with support and services temporarily while we build the housing and shelter we need.
So this is one of kind of the toughest parts of the plans that you've outlined, this idea that we're no longer just going to sweep and move people, but people are going to get a choice, you've said. They can go into the shelter or the housing provided by the city, they can go into mental health treatment or drug rehab, or you're saying they'll be arrested. They won't just be moved along. You're going to arrest folks and take folks to jail for that?
Listen, I first want to start with, when you talk to service providers, they'll tell you the vast majority of people want to be in safer locations. And my own just limited experiences, I think they're right from people I've met with. So I'm confident that when you can keep people with their partners, their families, their pets, their community, we're going to have a lot of success getting people inside. But service providers will also tell you there's some people who are living in encampments that are taking advantage of people. And the piece for me is when you're taking advantage, when you're dealing drugs, even if you're an addict yourself, we can't allow you to violate the law and frankly destroy other people's lives. So in those situations where someone's breaking the law like that, yeah, I think we need to arrest them.
But you can arrest somebody for dealing drugs without arresting them for camping on the streets.
You can.
You can put somebody into drug treatment, but you've said that you would also arrest people for the urban camping ban, people who have not committed another crime other than being homeless and camping on the streets.
Last resort. And Kyle, we have in our history even figured out when we've had to do this in other situations, how you can build a system that isn't about the criminal justice system, but has off-ramps. And I think we could do the same here, where you deferred sentences or judgment, and the whole point here is get people in safer living conditions and set a standard for our own city about how we allow people to live.
Do you have any concern that with those folks that cycling them in and out of jail is not going to really improve their situations? That's just going to give them a criminal record?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what we don't want to do. That's why I think it's the last resort. And I really believe outreach workers and supports and services are going to get people where they need to be. I really do. So
right now, Denver Sheriff's Department is way understaffed.
Way understaffed.
Any concern about sending more people their way for nothing more than camping on the streets? That doesn't seem like what you'd want to fill jail cells with,
Yeah, absolutely. It isn't at all what we want to do. And I have concerns even without, if we're highly successful and everybody goes to safer locations and we don't have to do anything to force people, I have concerns about our current situation for our sheriffs. We have to figure out how we recruit more sheriffs, more police officers, more 911 dispatchers and call takers. We have serious gaps in our workforce. So you have made the pledge that you will end unsanctioned camping in your first year in office. Is that a real goal
or an aspirational goal? And you know why I'm asking this, because 20 years ago when you were with the Hickenlooper administration, he said that he was going to end homelessness. That didn't work. And he said later, well, it's just an aspirational goal. It wasn't a real goal. Is yours a real goal?
Listen, I operated under Denver's Road Home it was a real goal. This is a real goal. To me, though, this is about us as a society saying, we are not going to allow people to live in the conditions they're living today. We do have standards, and we are going to provide better living conditions. But temporarily, we know people are going to have to camp as we build longer term what we need. But I also think, Kyle, the way we start to actually make more progress is we do it as a region. And so I am grateful. I met with mayors in the region. 5 sitting mayors have endorsed this strategy, and I think we got a better shot at actually making real progress.
Have you had any conversations with the leaders of Aurora about this?
I have.
What's their take?
Yeah, I think, even Mayor Kaufman has talked with me about some of the work he's doing, where you try to have, you've seen the Rose Andom Center that focuses on domestic violence. He's looking at that same kind of structure, where you have wraparound supports for people to get indoors. Prevention, I would say, is where all the mayors are most interested. And frankly, that's where we probably need to spend most of our energy, because today more people are tipping into homelessness in our region than we're able to take out. So we're losing ground. And I think prevention is key, and I would say Mayor Kaufman was very motivated to focus on what can we do around prevention.
You hear different candidates talk about different ideas of how to shelter people experiencing homelessness. Do you have a particular preference between sanctioned camping sites, tiny home villages, converting motels, shelters, that kind of thing? Do you have a preference? Do you think one works better than the other?
I think we may need to do an all-the-above strategy here if we're really going to make headway. But I think it also includes we need better data, everybody reporting into our regional data system and using that to make strategic decisions. Because the reality is, it is much more about the wraparound and support services that we need. And so really focusing on which of those kinds of structures you just described provide that kind of wraparound support and stability. Real stability.
I'm going to ask you this question only because I think you're the only candidate in the race that's talking about a regional approach to homelessness. Is there any major county in the metro area that can opt out of having services for those experiencing homelessness? Because right now, Douglas County is saying, we're not going to provide services, we're just going to send them someplace else.
Yeah. I mean, that's the challenge, right? This is about us coming together and agreeing we have to do this as a region. But here's what we all know in this region, too. If Denver can't hold the weight of this issue, we're all in trouble. And so it's in all of our self-interest to figure out together how we do address this. And for the first time, all of those other cities and counties are experiencing what we've experienced for a long time. So I think people are more motivated. I think we can come together.
And one last thought on the issue of homelessness. I'm glad we spent some time on it because everybody agrees it's important. You will hear even service providers talk about push-pull factors with homelessness. Yeah. And there's an ex-viewer who wrote in after the debate the other night and said, if Denver becomes the place that offers shelter to everybody, then everybody's going to want to come to Denver to get that shelter. Do you think that's the way it would work?
Well, I suppose if that was true, then every city in the nation is struggling with this issue. There's very few that have escaped it, I'm guessing. And many are providing better housing and sheltering than we're doing today. So my answer would be, I don't think that's how it's going to work. I do think by providing housing and sheltering, we actually could save resources compared to what we are spending today to manage the problem the way we are.
Let's talk about policing. When I asked you in our recent debate if you'd make any drastic changes in policing from the Hancock administration, one thing you mentioned was that increased transparency from DPD would improve public perception of the work of police. Is DPD's problem perception, or is it their policies and their performance? Because you look at that $14 million settlement for police brutality during the summer of 2020 protests. That doesn't seem like a perception problem.
I agree. We also have a culture issue, right? Probably every police department in the nation, I'll just focus on Denver. But the cultures of police department, I think, is when the going gets tough, you kind of close in and get a little tighter. The reason I talk about transparency is what it invites in really minor interactions is feedback that says, what could you have done better? What should you have done differently before we're in a major kind of interaction or issue? And I think what we have to do in terms of our culture is change where our officers are giving each other that kind of feedback. And I think the way you get there is by we engage our community to give us feedback, by being more transparent, and our officers start to do it too. And what we discover is it's not so terrible to be told you could have done something a little bit better, so that when the real crisis happens, we're even better then.
What does that practically look like, that
Yeah.
transparency model?
There's a lot. Well, I think one is just opening up more. When there is a shooting, that we show the entire video, not pieces of it. When there's questions about interactions we've had, that we try to put it out earlier and faster so people can look at it with us and be critical of what we did, or recognize when we got it right. And I think it's both of those. This is a movement certainly around the nation. People are recognizing, and I think there's a lot of resources that can assist us with how we do this work and improve the culture of our police department.
Well, we talk about policing. I want to make sure that we understand exactly where you stand on the issue of qualified immunity, because we had a brief discussion about it in the debate. In 2020, there's a bipartisan bill that went through the state legislature that took away the immunity that police officers have, taking away their personal immunity if they do something that violates somebody's civil rights. They could lose some of their own money in this process.
Yeah.
And there's a split amongst the candidates running for mayor about whether that's hampering recruiting or whether police officers should get that qualified immunity back. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, so I know we want everything to be so crystal clear in black and white. Here's what that bill says is if you violate someone's constitutional rights or the law, you have personal liability. 100% agree. And my guess is most officers would agree with that as well. The issue for me is there's another provision that talks about the percentage of any settlement that a police officer could be on the line for personally. And sometimes the city may settle a lawsuit where the officer was not at fault. They did not violate someone's constitutional rights or violate the law. And I think that's the piece we have to reassure our officers, and mostly those we're trying to recruit to be our officers, that they will not be personally liable in those situations.
Do you think that Denver needs to lower the standards either in education or character to get more people into the academy?
No,
okay.
I don't. I do believe we could work with the Civil Service Commission to create a more efficient process, to look at what are the standards we're using in terms of all the tests we go through. Are we really getting to the very best officers at the fastest rate?
The idea of social housing is one that a number of candidates for mayor are interested in. Broadly speaking, it's this idea that the city itself could become the developer of parcels and could develop affordable housing in this case without the constraints of the profit motive of private enterprise. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah. So today we do have social housing. Denver Housing Authority is the city's arm of making sure we have housing that is more affordable for people. That said, I'm particularly interested, and I'm not sure this probably qualifies as social housing, but I am interested as mayor in developing a for-sale housing product on publicly owned land that we could allow our own residents to be able to buy and live in neighborhoods they never could afford. Their kids can go to schools they probably never could have gotten them to. And it's those surface lots. And I've seen how you can build on top of them, maintain the parking, and build for-sale units. And I'm very interested in doing that as mayor.
How does that differ from what people broadly describe as social housing?
Yeah, well, one is a rental product, which is really important, and we need more of that. But this is a for-sale product. And this allows families to begin to build wealth, families who have been restricted from being able to do that for generations.
And this would be property that would be developed by the city, and then families would buy it under what, a covenant that it couldn't be sold above a certain level for a certain amount of time? How would you work that?
I mean, I think this is where we have to figure out, because you do want them to be able to build some wealth and gain the equity, but you also want to keep the product affordable. Because it's on publicly owned land, you take the price of the land out, so it's like land banking or a land trust, so it should help on the affordability in the long run. And that's exactly how I do it. By the way, think about rec centers, libraries, police stations, firehouses, partnering with Denver Public Schools, all those surface lots that we could do this kind of work in.
On our candidate survey, which voters can find at 9news.com, you answer a number of yes/no questions, in-depth explanations on a number of different issues. You said there that you don't support Denver pursuing rent control. The state legislature lifts that statewide ban. Why is that?
Mine is just based on every other city who's done it. It really hasn't worked. It hasn't helped. And I'm really interested in things that actually help affordability in the long run.
You'll hear other folks in the race, specifically Lisa Calderon, say, well, if rent control is one of a number of tools, not just simply a panacea, that it can work. You don't think it has a place in the toolbox at all?
I don't.
On our candidate survey, you declined to say if you support the development of the Park Hill Golf Course as proposed on the ballot. I would like you to say.
Yeah, I will, Kyle.
Okay.
So first let me say this. I had the chance to meet with dozens of people who have been working on this for years. I agree with them. We need housing that's affordable, and we need more parkland in the city. What's also clear after reading the easement and the state laws, only a judge can remove this easement. So the fact we all continue to vote on it is confusing, but it is what it is. What I was waiting for is the community benefits agreement. And I got the chance to review that around February, I don't know, 10th or something. So sorry, I must have submitted this before I finished it. But the community benefits agreement's impressive. I'm a yes vote.
You're a yes vote. You think that the city is getting enough out of West Side for what the developers are getting in return?
Here's what I think. I think the location of this warrants that you have more density toward that light rail station and along Colorado Boulevard. And I think we need to have parkland, and we're getting that too. And it includes 1 in 4. It's the highest number of units that are affordable, 25%. It has set-asides for grocery store and for people to be able to own businesses, local businesses, to be able to be in the development. I don't think we could do better ourselves.
On the day that we're recording this, Tuesday, February 21st, there was another alarm at Suncor this morning. There's another vapor leak. Last one before this was on Friday. In the debate, when we asked candidates who would put more pressure on state and federal environmental regulators on Suncor, everybody raised their hand. We didn't get a chance to go down the line and talk about what that would mean. What would that mean to you?
Yeah, I think this is where I would really rely on our regulators and, frankly, our environmental community to explore what can we do and what does that look like. But we also know we have huge resources coming down from the federal government through the Infrastructure Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. I think this is where we could look at those and ask the question, how can we best use those resources to improve our air quality and address issues just like this?
Is Suncor going to be a part of the Denver metro area for the foreseeable future? Is that just what it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is, right, our dependency on using still traditional fuels. And so the challenge here is if you shut it down, you're now trucking in and it has another environmental impact. And I think that requires analysis of the entire kind of proposal of what do you do instead to make sure you're not doing something that's worse.
When you hear from the folks who live in Glowville, Rio Swansea, around there, it just seems like generation after generation the burden has been laid on those folks, whether it was the interstate coming through, whether it's the environmental impacts, whether it's the widening of I-70. Now it's more issues with Suncor. What can the city better do to protect the folks who live there? Yeah,
well, two things. The President of the United States instituted, I think it's an executive order technically, but the Justice 40% of all money going in to address environmental issues goes into those communities who've suffered the greatest. I'd say that is GES. And the city, I think, has 50% commitment. That's what we do. Our money goes there first to try to address the historic issues that we've caused.
One last question for you, just kind of about the horse race, about the race in general. So I think when you got into this race, and maybe even before, you were considered to be a front runner, in part because the thought was that you could sew up the conservative vote and you could add some Democrats on top of it. And that was kind of the winning Hickenlooper coalition, at least in the runoff in 2003, which was the second to last open race for mayor. But now this law and order lane that you're in is getting crowded. Like more than half of the candidates are saying that they would forcibly clear homeless camps. There are another 5 candidates that are echoing the promise to arrest people if they won't go into shelter or treatment. What does the fact that so many people are crowding into that one lane tell you about kind of the issue and the state of the race?
What it tells me about the issue is that what we're doing today and the conditions in which people are living are serious and inhumane, and we have to take action. About the race, that there's a lot of people who care deeply about their city, and we're all working hard to figure out how we could help address these issues. Did you expect to have so many people echoing the same line as you on those issues? Because it wasn't that way when the race started. I don't know. I don't know. That's fair. I don't know as a fair answer. Yeah. I never really thought about it. I think for me, how I think about policy is I try to think about what actually can improve the conditions that we're trying to address and what's the best way to get there, including being humane and giving people dignity. That's really important to me. Is there anything else that is vitally important that we haven't talked about here or in the debate or on your candidate questionnaire? I know you do 18 of these things a day, but is there anything else that you want to just make sure that you're heard on before our audience? Not that I can think of. Okay. All right. So. We'll stop back if there is. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.